in 2019, the first time capsule buried by Stumpy Sanderson and his gang of mischievous working-class boys, and which was actually an old Watney's Party 7 can, was unearthed. Then in 2023, the second time capsule, which was an old Courage Jackpot Bitter Party can, was discovered. And now, Whistling 5 Anarchic Productions, in conjunction with the 1970s Cigarette Appreciation Club and Puffer Patterson's Benevolent Fund for Aging Thespians, proudly presents Series 2 of Stumpy Sanderson's 1970s stories, and the 22 stories found in that second time capsule. As narrated by Andrew Brammer. Bonjour, bon après-midi, et bonsoir. The story you are about to hear is narrated in the first person, because I, just like Stumpy, witnessed firsthand the momentous events which it describes. So, let's park up the rally chopper, dim the lava lamp, switch off that episode of Catweasel, finish up the plate of Vesta beef curry, crack open a can of Double Diamond, light up a mannequin cigar, and kick back, sit back, and listen in to the anarchic and outrageous japes, scrapes and capers of Stumpy Sanderson and his gang. For this episode, we head back to 1977 for Macready Down and Up, shaken and stirred. Chucking apples can sometimes get you into a lot of trouble. And I can't remember whose idea it was, mine, Stumpy's or Bendy Henderson's, to hurl the apple that hit the side of Old Man Macready's head. But whosever it was an absolutely terrible idea that was to backfire on us horribly. We were on our way back to Bendy's house after getting the bus back from watching a scrambling race involving Phil the Ferret and various characters on a notorious stretch of road on the other side of town known as Pothole Street, so called due to the large holes and splits that ran along its whole uneven and extremely bumpy length. The road resembled an RAF bombing run, terrible for local motorists, but ideal for illicit motorcycle scrambling races. We had all gone along as we knew that the race was going to be the last one held, for there had been an article in the latest Dunstable Gazette saying that the unacceptable road was at last going to be resurfaced. So, walking through the park on that warm afternoon, we spotted two things that drew us like magnets. Firstly, on the floor, a discarded whole apple, complete with a couple of emerging maggots. Secondly, striding about 30 yards parallel to us, the string-vested, work-trousered and hobnail-booted figure of Old Man Macready, that renowned wild man bare-knuckle brawler, with arms like tree trunks and a Charles Atlas torso adorned with a large tangerine tiger tattoo, brutal with a pickaxe and shovel, and not only in his role as a council workman. Now, we already had history with Macready, having crossed his path on several occasions with various pranks, often resulting in him chasing us like a terrifying Scottish rhino, but thankfully never actually catching us, the consequences of such a fate being too terrible to contemplate. So, as I said, I can't remember whose idea it was, but it was Bendy, with his pipe cleaner beanpole figure and by far the longest arms of any of us, although on reflection he was probably the least accurate thrower of any of us, who picked up and hurled the apple, just before Macready was approaching the top park gate. The intention had been for the piece of fruit to just whiz in front of Macready and give him a start. But instead, with a horrible and maggoty splat, it smacked straight into the side of his head. As we stood horrified, it took a few seconds for Macready to register what had just happened, his head being so hard that he hadn't even staggered. And then, wiping his monstrous head with his huge murderous hand, he turned and with us now seeing the familiar flaming wolf-like eyes and bristling Mexican bandit moustache facing us, and hearing Macready's huge trademark roar, Stumpy shouted, "Leg it!" and the chase was on. One advantage we held over Macready was that we knew we could outrun him, for despite his physical might and ferocious prowess as a brawler, Macready, with his clomping hobnail boots, simply could not match us as runners. So as we ran back down the park, we were gaining an increasingly healthy lead over him. Hammering past a bemused gaggle of older kids on bikes, we continued sprinting, until eventually, slowing up, we looked back, seeing to our great delight that Macready was some way back, and was indeed stopping. Breathing hard and laughing, we now slowed to a walk, and, with the safety of the small tarmacked car park and entrance to the bottom park gates a fairly short distance ahead, decided again to take another look behind. It was then that Bendy shouted, "Struth! Macready's on a bike!" Horrified, we all saw that Macready, who must have made some form of deal with those older kids, was now sitting with his huge figure astride a blue rally chopper. Slowly he began to pedal, and then he began to rapidly pick up speed on the bone-hard grass. Stumpy shouted, "Scarper!" and we were off again. Another look behind, though, showed that Macready was now horribly making deadly progress. Faster and faster we ran, our lungs bursting, sweat increasing, hearts thumping, Bendy looking behind again and shouting, "He's gaining! He's gaining!" Desperately we reached the tarmacked car park area, but the large park gates were too far to reach in time, as yet another look behind showed that Macready was already at the swings, riding like a maniac on that chopper. It was then that Stumpy spotted the yellow flatbed council lorry that had been parking overnight in the park for the past couple of weeks, and shouted, "Quick! Round the side of that truck, and then under the tarpaulin in the back!" We all ran up the side of the truck, lifted the tarpaulin up, and, breathing in the smell of tar and gravel, we dived in and hid amongst the pickaxes, shovels, and other road-mending tools. Lying as still as corpses, we desperately tried to calm our breathing, which thankfully was gradually slowing, but our hearts were still beating like jackhammers. Stumpy then peered out from beneath the tarpaulin and immediately pulled back under, emitting a shh to me and Bendy as we picked up the close-by whir of slowing up bike wheels, followed by the applying of brakes, and then the clomp of heavy hobnail boots walking round the side and back of the lorry. Our hearts were beating even louder, sweat pouring off us, sheer terror. We were like rats in a trap. And then, terribly, we felt the tarpaulin being pulled tight and taut over us, the clomp of the hobnail boots again, the opening and closing of the cab door of the truck, the firing of the ignition, the low and belching rumble of the engine, the revving of the accelerator pedal, and then we were off. I won't go into the details of the journey through Dunstable, apart from saying that, due to the lunatic speed the truck was going at, we were having to hold on to and wedge ourselves into whatever parts of the flatbed that we could, the only relief from the bumps and jolts being the couple of occasions the truck slowed down. The tarpaulin covering us had been tied down so securely that we were only barely able to peer out from beneath its great weight. But even though our viewing was limited, we could just about see where we were travelling. Luton Road, through the lights, under the railway bridge, turning left up Station Road. The route seemed familiar, very familiar, almost like déjà vu. Somehow, as if by intuition, we all knew where we were heading. Then more turns, more straight stretches, and, finally, the truck braked and stopped, engine idling. Due to the lorry's roar on our journey, we had barely been able to hear what we were trying to say to each other above the din. But now, as we all peeked out from under the heavy tarpaulin, Bendy and I could only agree with Stumpy when he hissed, "I don't like the look of this." For we now saw that we were at the head of Pothole Street, that notorious and crater-ridden road, and we realised our awful fate and predicament. How could we have made such elementary mistakes? It was Macready's council truck that had been regularly parking in that car park, and as a council workman, he was probably going to be one of the crew who was going to be fixing the road we were now on. Then, once again, we heard the appalling sound of that truck revving with all its might. We gave one more desperate but failed attempt to lift that tarpaulin and create enough room for us to wriggle out, before Stumpy then shouted, "Hold on, everyone!" And then, with a great thundering roar, that Bedford TK truck was off again, hammering down Pothole Street as fast as it could go, deliberately bouncing over the craters, up and down and up, veering from one side of the road to the other, like a jalopy being driven at breakneck speed across a quarry and slag pile by a maniac, us holding on for dear life, our bones and bodies being jolted, shaken and pounded. After the first run, the truck slowed and we felt it turning. With all that lurching and battering, we were now all feeling completely disorientated. And then the truck started back again, faster and faster, bouncing down and up and down, shaking us to our very cores. In all, the truck completed 4 runs, and as we lay there, thankfully still alive, but dazed and stunned, our bodies and bones having been rattled to breaking point, we became aware of the engine now idling, of a cab door opening, the sound of hobnailed boots, and then we saw daylight as the tarpaulin was untied and pulled back. Above us, the terrifying Mexican bandit moustached and gravel-dry face of Macready. "Now, which one of you idiots threw that apple?" Thank you for listening to this episode of Stumpy Sanderson's 1970s Stories. And please don't forget to check out the other stories from Series 2 and Series 1. You can also follow Stumpy Sanderson's 1970s Stories on Facebook, where you can keep up to date with all the news about live shows and other Stumpy events. There's also the website, www.stumpysanderson.co.uk, and the Stumpy Sanderson's 1970s Stories YouTube channel. And you can get in touch with me at andrew@stumpysanderson.co.uk. Until the next story, au revoir et bonne nuit, and keep grooving.
Yeah. This podcast has been recorded using a DIY punk rock philosophy. Yeah.